People are weird, and so are you. People are weird. That's not an insult. And it's not an observation limited to strangers on the subway or the neighbor who insists on mowing his lawn at precisely 6:30 in the morning. It's a universal truth, one that applies to every single one of us, including you, and certainly me. Human beings are bundles of contradictions wrapped in layers of habits, fears, quirks, and rituals that make sense only in the fragile context of our own private worlds. What's normal to one person looks absurd to another, and what feels comforting to you might be baffling to me. And that's the beauty of it. Our weirdness is not a flaw. It's the texture of being alive. Think about the little things you do when nobody's watching. Maybe you hum the same off-key tune every time you brush your teeth. Maybe you count the steps between your bedroom and the kitchen, even though you've walked that route thousands of times and know exactly how far it is. Maybe you talk to your plants, or apologize to a chair after bumping into it. These are small, ridiculous moments, and yet they're strangely precious. They reveal something about how your mind organizes the chaos of existence. They're a window into the unpolished self, the self that doesn't need to perform for others. If you're honest, those small private rituals probably say more about who you are than your resume or your social media profile ever could. And yet, weirdness makes people uncomfortable. Society teaches us to iron out our oddities, to tuck them away in the back closet of our personality like a pair of socks with holes in them. We're supposed to be smooth, predictable, palatable. Employers want team players, not the guy who eats his sandwich in concentric circles or the woman who insists on wearing Halloween socks in March. But here's the paradox: the very weirdness we try to suppress is often what makes us lovable, memorable, or creative. Think about the friends you cherish most. I bet it's not because they're perfectly average. It's because they have that strange laugh, or that inexplicable obsession with 19th century lighthouses, or that habit of texting you song lyrics at 2 in the morning. Weirdness is sticky. It lingers in memory. It's the seasoning that makes a person taste like themselves. Part of the reason we resist our own strangeness is fear of judgment. Humans are exquisitely tuned social animals. For most of our evolutionary history, being cast out of the group was a death sentence. So we polish our behavior, trying to appear normal, safe, trustworthy. But what is normal anyway? A moving target, defined by the arbitrary standards of culture and time. In medieval Europe, bathing once a month was normal. Today, if you skip a shower for a week, people avoid sitting next to you on the bus. In one culture, eating bugs is perfectly ordinary. In another, it's a dare on a reality TV show. Normal is just collective weirdness that enough people agreed to pretend wasn't weird anymore. Consider laughter. It's one of the strangest human behaviors if you look at it objectively. We open our mouths, expel bursts of air, and make a series of staccato sounds that mean nothing in themselves. And yet, laughter is contagious, disarming, and deeply social. Chimps laugh too, but ours comes in a kaleidoscope of forms: giggles, snorts, wheezes, belly laughs, nervous chuckles. Why? Because laughter is less about humor and more about connection. It's a signal that says, I am safe with you. We are allies. You don't need to be on guard. Viewed through that lens, laughter is one of the most profound tools of survival we have, even though it looks and sounds utterly ridiculous. Another example: dreams. Every night, your brain cooks up bizarre hallucinations that mash together fragments of memory, emotion, and pure invention. You might dream of your childhood home fused with your current office, populated by long-lost classmates and talking cats. None of it makes sense, and yet when you wake up, you carry the emotional residue as if it were real. Dreams are a nightly reminder that your mind is a surrealist artist with a sense of humor. And yet, people have built entire belief systems around them. Prophecies, omens, hidden messages from the subconscious. Maybe it's all just the random firing of neurons, but maybe, just maybe, your brain knows that absurdity is part of the truth. Now, let's get personal. One of the strangest things about being human is the gap between who we think we are and who we actually appear to be. Inside your head, you're a complex novel with countless subplots. To others, you're just a thin pamphlet, glimpsed through the keyhole of your behavior. You may think you're mysterious, but most of your quirks are visible to anyone who spends enough time with you. The way you tilt your head when you're listening, the words you overuse without realizing, the unconscious rhythm of your footsteps. People notice, even if they never mention it. And the funniest part, they find you weird for things you don't even know you're doing. Let's not forget the collective weirdness we indulge in together. Sports, for instance. Strangers gather in massive stadiums, paint their faces, and scream with joy or rage as other strangers chase a ball across a field. Objectively, it's bizarre, but subjectively, it's deeply meaningful. It binds people into tribes, gives them stories to tell, and outlets for emotion. The same goes for religion, fashion, politics, or TikTok dances. We invent rituals, assign them significance, and then act as if the meaning were embedded in the universe itself. We are meaning-making creatures, and our preferred tool for building meaning is ritualized weirdness. Here's another uncomfortable truth: your body is weird. Think of all the unconscious processes happening right now. Your heart is thumping, your lungs are inflating and deflating, your stomach is churning acid, your neurons are firing like an electrical storm. Occasionally, your body produces hiccups, a completely useless spasm of the diaphragm, or goosebumps, a leftover reflex from when our ancestors had more body hair and needed to look intimidating. Evolution is a tinkerer, not an engineer. We are walking museums of biological accidents, most of which we've normalized because everyone else has them too. But step back for a moment, and you realize the human body is a carnival of absurdities that somehow manages to work most of the time. And what about language? Humans are the only creatures that gossip about each other's weirdness while inventing words to normalize it. Slang, idioms, metaphors, all of them are shortcuts for shared experience, but also gates that lock outsiders out. To someone learning English, the phrase "kick the bucket" doesn't sound like death. It sounds like clumsy farm work. To a non-native speaker, "Fill the beans" is not about secrets, it's about making a mess in the kitchen. Language is one of our weirdest inventions, invisible sound symbols that rearrange reality in the minds of listeners. And because language is weird, it keeps evolving. New slang pops up, old words die out, and somehow we all pretend there's a stable thing called grammar holding it together. Spoiler: grammar is just the current consensus on which weird habits will allow. Now, here's the twist. Acknowledging our weirdness can be liberating. Once you accept that nobody is normal, you start to see strangeness as a common denominator rather than a defect. That nervous laugh you thought made you look silly, it's the glue in someone else's memory of you. That odd hobby you were ashamed to admit, collecting stamps, watching obscure documentaries, rereading the same novel every year, might be the very thing that makes you relatable. Weirdness is connective tissue. When you show it, you invite others to show theirs, and suddenly the room feels safer, warmer, more human. Of course, there's a shadow side. Sometimes weirdness becomes dangerous. Conspiracy theories, cult behaviors, groupthink, these are just weird ideas scaled up and amplified by community. The same tendency that makes us bond over quirks also makes us vulnerable to manipulation. The human mind craves patterns, and when it finds them in the wrong places, it can spiral into destructive weirdness. Believing your lucky socks influence the outcome of a football game is harmless. Believing that drinking bleach cures disease, deadly. So part of being human is learning to distinguish between the harmless eccentricities that color our lives and the dangerous delusions that distort them. Still, most weirdness falls in the harmless category, and thank goodness for that. Imagine a world where everyone acted logically all the time. No inside jokes, no daydreaming, no spontaneous dances in the kitchen, no sentimental attachments to objects. Efficiency might skyrocket, but joy would evaporate. Weirdness is inefficiency in the best sense. It's the friction that creates sparks. It's what makes art possible, humor necessary, and love unpredictable. Try explaining romance to an alien species. People exchange fluids, share resources, and make irrational promises about forever. By any rational metric, it's absurd. And yet, it's the heartbeat of human culture. To be weird is to be alive. If you've ever caught yourself crying at a commercial about laundry detergent, congratulations, you've encountered your own weirdness. Human emotions are not rational accountants. They don't tally up importance and decide, "Ah yes, this event is worthy of tears, that one is not." Instead, they leapfrog across experiences like sparks from a fire, attaching themselves to the strangest things. Why do we cry when a fictional character dies, even though we know they're made up? Why do we feel sentimental about an old t-shirt we never wear? Why does a smell transport us back to a childhood moment we didn't even know we remembered? Because emotions are weird, and they don't care about logic. They're there to make life vivid, not efficient. Memory adds its own layer of strangeness. Neuroscientists have shown that every time you recall an event, you actually rewrite it. The act of remembering alters the memory itself, like making a photocopy of a photocopy. Over time, the details shift, fade, or get replaced. And yet, we cling to memory as if it were a permanent archive. Couples fight over who said what 5 years ago. Siblings argue about whose version of childhood is accurate. Nations build entire mythologies on selective recollections. Our sense of self is glued together by faulty tape. And still, it holds. Weird, absolutely, but also beautiful. Because if memory were perfect, we'd never forgive, never reinterpret, never grow. The flaws are what give us room to become someone new. Speaking of nations, consider how collective weirdness shapes identity. Flags, anthems, national foods, these are arbitrary symbols that we invest with profound meaning. People go to war over lines on a map, defend their cuisine as if it were sacred scripture, and cheer for athletes they've never met simply because they were born on the same soil. Patriotism is socially sanctioned weirdness, and it shows how malleable human belonging can be. At its best, it unites strangers in solidarity. At its worst, it divides humanity into hostile camps. Either way, it demonstrates that we are creatures who need stories bigger than ourselves, even if those stories are stitched together from peculiar fabric. Now, let's get closer to the everyday again. Relationships are microcosms of weirdness. Think about the private language you develop with someone you love, nicknames, inside jokes, silly rituals. Outsiders might find them incomprehensible, even cringeworthy. But for the two people involved, they're intimate treasures. Shared weirdness is intimacy in disguise. It's why best friends can dissolve into laughter over a single word, or couples can communicate entire conversations with a raised eyebrow. When you find someone whose weirdness harmonizes with yours, you feel at home. That's one of the secret definitions of love. Synchronized strangeness. Technology, of course, has amplified our weirdness in ways we barely notice. We carry glowing rectangles in our pockets, touch them hundreds of times a day, and experience phantom vibrations when they're not even buzzing. We send little yellow faces to express emotions, scroll through endless feeds of strangers dancing, and form parasocial bonds with people we'll never meet. If aliens ever intercepted our group chats, they'd assume we were a species obsessed with sending pictures of our meals and tiny looping videos of cats. The internet is humanity's collective ID on display, an archive of weirdness at global scale. And yet, instead of being embarrassed, we double down. We curate our weirdness, brand it, monetize it. What used to be quirks are now content. And here's the kicker: the future promises even stranger things. Artificial intelligence writing love poems, people paying real money for digital shoes that don't exist outside a screen, humans falling in love with virtual partners, or raising robotic pets. What seems weird today could be normal tomorrow. Remember when online dating was stigmatized? Now, it's how millions of couples meet. Weirdness evolves, and in hindsight, it often looks like innovation wearing a silly hat. That means your grandchildren will probably think your weirdness was quaint while they're busy doing things you can't even imagine yet. So where does that leave us? If everyone is weird, if weirdness is universal, what does it mean to say, people are weird and so are you? It's both an observation and an invitation. The observation is simple: you are not an exception. You are a collage of habits, contradictions, and eccentricities. You're not as consistent as you think. And that's okay. The invitation is this: instead of sanding down your quirks, let them breathe. Instead of hiding your odd fascinations, share them. Weirdness is not something to be cured. It's something to be cultivated. It's the soil in which authenticity grows. Of course, embracing your weirdness doesn't mean abandoning all social norms. There's a balance. Some conventions exist for good reason: traffic laws, hygiene practices, the basic etiquette that keeps us from descending into chaos. But within those guardrails, there's ample room to be delightfully strange. Wear the socks that make you smile. Dance in the kitchen. Collect rubber ducks. Memorize obscure trivia. Quote your favorite movie until your friends roll their eyes. None of it detracts from your value. It adds texture to it. Think of life as a symphony. Normalcy provides the rhythm, but weirdness is the melody. Here's the paradox that might comfort you. The very things you fear make you unrelatable are often what connect you most deeply with others. Ever confessed a quirky habit to someone and heard them say, "Wait, you do that too?" That moment of shared recognition is gold. It's proof that weirdness is not isolation. It's potential community. The quirks that embarrass you could be the very bridge that leads to friendship, love, or collaboration. The secret is daring to let them be seen. So yes, people are weird. They always have been, and they always will be. The details shift across cultures and centuries, but the essence remains. We are creatures of contradiction, inventors of rituals, seekers of meaning, carriers of strange habits. And so are you. The sooner you embrace that, the freer you'll feel. Because once you stop trying to fit into the myth of normal, you get to step into the reality of being human, gloriously, messily, hilariously weird. And that, perhaps, is the most normal thing of all. If we're going to keep exploring the weirdness of being human, we need to acknowledge one of the most peculiar truths of all. Most of the time, people don't even know why they do what they do. We like to imagine that our choices spring from rational thought, careful deliberation, or some logical weighing of pros and cons, but study after study in psychology and behavioral science has revealed that much of our decision-making comes from hidden biases, emotional impulses, or habits we don't even notice. You might think you chose that brand of cereal because it's healthier, but really, it's because the box color reminded you of your grandmother's kitchen. You might insist that you like a particular song because it's musically superior, but in truth, it's because you first heard it during a summer when you felt free. Weirdness isn't just about what we do. It's about why we do it, and often, the why is completely irrational. Let's take an example that almost everyone can relate to: superstition. Rationally, we know that knocking on wood, avoiding black cats, or wearing a lucky shirt doesn't influence the outcome of events. And yet, people cling to these rituals with the stubbornness of a barnacle on a ship's hull. Why? Because uncertainty terrifies us. The world is chaotic, outcomes are unpredictable, and our brains crave even the illusion of control. Superstition is weird, but it's also a psychological band-aid. It reassures us that we're not entirely powerless, that our small actions can ripple into the universe in some meaningful way. And if that weirdness lowers our anxiety enough to help us function, maybe it's not so irrational after all. Another strange aspect of human behavior is our obsession with categorization. We love to put things and people into neat little boxes: introvert or extrovert, optimist or pessimist, dog person or cat person. It's as if the complexity of reality overwhelms us, so we chop it into digestible chunks. But reality resists neat boxes. Most people are a blend, a messy spectrum of traits that shift depending on the context. You might be introverted at a party full of strangers but extroverted with your closest friends. You might be optimistic in love but pessimistic in politics. Our need to categorize is a weird attempt to make sense of a fluid, shape-shifting experience. And in doing so, we sometimes trap ourselves in labels that don't fit. Consider fashion as another playground for weirdness. Every generation looks back at the styles of the previous one and asks, what were they thinking? Bell-bottoms, powdered wigs, shoulder pads, skinny jeans. Each seemed perfectly reasonable, inevitable, even at the time. Fashion is collective weirdness codified into fabric. It's how people signal belonging, rebellion, or identity. And here's the kicker: most fashion trends start as quirks. A few outliers do something odd: rip their jeans, wear sneakers with suits, dye their hair neon, and if enough others mimic them, the weird becomes normal. Until it doesn't, and the cycle repeats. Weirdness is the raw material of style. Food habits reveal even stranger quirks. Humans are the only animals that invent elaborate rituals around eating. Think about it: no lion pauses to bless its gazelle before taking a bite, and no bird insists on seasoning its worms. But humans, we host dinner parties, develop taboos, create entire cuisines based on geography and myth. One culture reveres cows as sacred, another eats them with gusto. One culture prizes fermented shark, another would gag at the smell. Even within a single society, people have personal food quirks: the friend who won't let different foods touch on their plate, the aunt who insists peanut butter and pickles are a perfect combo, The coworker who microwaves fish in the office kitchen that's less quirky and more villainous. But still, food is fuel. Yes, but for humans, it's also theater, identity, memory, and comfort. Our weirdness shows up 3 times a day, minimum. Let's not ignore the weirdness of language in relationships. Have you ever noticed how couples develop entire micro-dialects? Baby talk, pet names, nonsense words that mean nothing outside their bubble. Outsiders cringe, but inside the relationship, these words carry massive emotional weight. It's another form of shared weirdness, a secret handshake in verbal form. Parents and children do the same thing. Families invent sayings, mispronunciations, inside jokes that survive for decades. What looks like nonsense to the world is actually glue holding people together. Weirdness, in this sense, is a dialect of intimacy. Technology has only magnified these habits. Social media platforms are basically museums of curated weirdness. TikTok trends that make no sense out of context, dances, lip syncs, challenges spread like wildfire. Why are millions of people obsessed with watching others unpack mystery boxes, or clean their houses in sped-up videos, or whisper into microphones for ASMR? Because human brains are wired for novelty and pattern, and sometimes the weirdest things scratch that itch better than anything else. You might judge a trend as ridiculous, but if it brings someone joy or calm, who's to say it's any less valid than your obsession with, say, fantasy football or antique spoons? There's also the weirdness of time perception. Hours drag at work but vanish when you're on vacation. A week feels endless when you're waiting for news, but years disappear in hindsight. Childhood summers stretch into infinity, while adult years collapse into blinks. Why? Because our brains don't perceive time uniformly. They compress, stretch, distort, depending on novelty, attention, and emotion. That's why you can recall a childhood day in vivid detail but struggle to remember what you had for lunch last Tuesday. Time is less like a straight line and more like an accordion, expanding and contracting based on our weirdly subjective experience. Another frontier of weirdness lies in our relationship with objects. We assign personalities to our cars, name our houseplants, get angry at our laptops as if they could feel guilt. Some people form deep attachments to stuffed animals they've had since childhood, carrying them into adulthood as secret comfort objects. Object attachment is illogical. Things are just things, but our brains are meaning-making machines. We pour emotions into the inanimate, and in return, they anchor us. Maybe that's why minimalism feels liberating to some but terrifying to others. To get rid of objects is, in a sense, to erase little anchors of self. Weird, yes, but deeply human. Let's zoom out to the cultural level again. Festivals are prime examples of collective weirdness. Entire cities shut down so people can throw colored powder at each other, or dance half-naked in the streets, or build enormous puppets and set them on fire. From the outside, these rituals look bizarre, but from the inside, they're sacred, joyous, essential. They release people from the monotony of ordinary life and allow them to step into an alternate reality, even if just for a day. Weirdness here becomes transformation. It's a reminder that life isn't just about survival, it's about play, spectacle, and shared imagination. Education is another domain full of oddities. Sit quietly, raise your hand, memorize arbitrary facts, regurgitate them on command. Entire generations go through these rituals, not because they perfectly prepare us for life, but because society decided this was the way to shape young minds. Then we graduate, look back, and realize half of what we learned was irrelevant, while the most important lessons like how to navigate failure, love, or uncertainty were never formally taught. Education is a monument to human weirdness, a system that's both necessary and flawed, structured yet improvisational, rigid yet constantly evolving. Now, let's talk about work. Offices are theaters of ritualized weirdness. The Monday morning small talk, the jargon-filled emails, the birthday cakes in conference rooms. Think about the absurdity of the phrase "circle back," or the elaborate dance of pretending to look busy when you're really scrolling through memes. Work culture is a patchwork of arbitrary norms that somehow convince millions of people to gather in fluorescent-lit rooms and stare at glowing screens for most of their waking lives. To an alien observer, it would look like mass voluntary captivity. And yet, within this weird system, people build careers, friendships, even identities. Weirdness scaled up becomes structure. At this point, you might be wondering, Does pointing out all this weirdness make life feel meaningless? Quite the opposite. Noticing the absurdities is a way of celebrating them. Life is too strange to take entirely seriously. The fact that you cry at movies, talk to your dog, hoard old concert tickets, or feel inexplicably calm when organizing your spice rack, these are not defects. They are proof that you are alive, engaged, sensitive to the texture of existence. Weirdness is the confetti of consciousness, and the more you notice it, the richer life becomes. There's another kind of weirdness we should explore: the way humans create elaborate systems of meaning and then forget that we invented them. Money, for instance. At its core, money is just paper, metal, or now, digital numbers on a screen. It has no inherent value, and yet it dictates almost every decision we make. People will spend decades of their lives chasing it, worrying about it, sacrificing for it. And if tomorrow, society collectively decided that seashells or digital tokens of cartoon apes were currency, we'd adjust. That's weird. We treat our inventions as if they were natural laws, forgetting that they're fragile agreements. But perhaps that's the essence of humanity. We're capable of imagining abstractions so vividly that they become real. Law works the same way. Lines on a map, words on paper, systems of courts, these are human constructs. A river doesn't care if it marks a national border, but people will go to war to defend that imaginary division. A rock doesn't care if it's public property or privately owned, but we've built entire systems of enforcement around such claims. We live inside invisible frameworks, and most of the time, we forget they're imaginary. That forgetting is part of the weirdness. It's necessary to keep the illusion stable. If we constantly remembered that all these rules were invented, the whole structure might collapse. Weirdness sustains civilization. Let's get more intimate again. One of the strangest experiences of being human is realizing that your inner world will never be fully knowable to anyone else. You can describe your thoughts, share your feelings, write novels or songs, but no one will ever experience your consciousness exactly as you do. That gap, the irreducible strangeness of being an island of awareness, can feel lonely. And yet, it also drives connection. We reach out precisely because we can't fully merge. We invent art, humor, storytelling, and even this podcast as bridges across the abyss of subjectivity. Weirdness isn't just quirks of behavior, it's the fundamental strangeness of existing as a mind trapped in a body, surrounded by other minds and bodies. Dreams of connection lead us to some of our weirdest behaviors. Consider the lengths people go to impress potential partners: peacocking with clothes, curating online profiles, rehearsing witty lines, performing exaggerated versions of themselves. Courtship rituals vary across cultures, but they all share the same core: people acting in ways that are, frankly, absurd, in hopes of being chosen. Birds build elaborate nests, crabs wave oversized claws. And humans spend 3 hours getting ready for a date only to pretend they just threw something on. Romance is theater, and it's gloriously weird. Yet without that strangeness, the species might not survive. Weirdness, once again, proves essential. Then there's the weirdness of belief. Humans are capable of believing things with absolute conviction even when evidence is shaky or non-existent. Ghosts, horoscopes, conspiracy theories, miracle cures. Some of these beliefs provide comfort, others cause harm, but all of them reveal the same tendency: we'd rather inhabit a weird, meaningful story than face a meaningless void. Is that irrational? Perhaps. But maybe irrationality is part of survival. A purely rational creature might give up when the odds look bad. Humans, powered by weird beliefs, keep going. That's why explorers set sail into unknown oceans, why scientists chase improbable theories, why people in the bleakest circumstances still hope. Weirdness is fuel. Even science, the most rational of human endeavors, carries traces of weirdness. Think about the idea that the universe began with a singularity, a point smaller than an atom exploding into everything. Or that time bends, that particles exist into places at once until observed, that black holes warp reality. These are deeply weird concepts, but they're supported by evidence. The boundary between weird and true is thinner than we think. What seems absurd today may be tomorrow's accepted fact. After all, once upon a time, people thought the idea of invisible germs causing disease was laughably strange. Now, it's basic knowledge. Weirdness is often the gateway to discovery. There's also the weirdness of self-deception. Humans lie to themselves constantly. We overestimate our abilities, underestimate risks, and rationalize mistakes. We create stories that make us the hero, or at least the misunderstood protagonist, even when the facts don't quite support it. Why? Because reality, unfiltered, is harsh. Self-deception softens the edges. It allows us to keep moving, to recover from setbacks, to maintain dignity. Some weirdness is defensive camouflage, a necessary fiction that helps us survive psychologically. Of course, it can also blind us, trapping us in patterns we refuse to see. But even then, it's a testament to our creativity. We're so imaginative that we can fool ourselves. Speaking of imagination, think about childhood play. A stick becomes a sword, a cardboard box becomes a spaceship, an empty room becomes a kingdom. Children are natural weirdness machines, unafraid to bend reality into whatever shape suits them. Adults often forget this skill, but traces linger. Every time you daydream, roleplay, or get lost in a story, you're indulging the same instinct. Weirdness is the sandbox of the mind, and it doesn't expire with age. It just gets camouflaged under responsibilities. Sometimes, the healthiest thing you can do is let yourself play again. And then there's mortality. Nothing highlights the weirdness of being human more than the fact that we know we're going to die. No other animal contemplates its own extinction in such detail. We plan funerals, build pyramids, write wills, invent afterlives. Death awareness shapes our entire culture or art, our religions, our philosophies. And yet, for all our preparation, it remains incomprehensible. How can something as vivid as consciousness simply vanish? Our inability to grasp it fully may be the strangest fact of all, but perhaps that's why life feels so precious. Weirdness isn't just in the way we live, it's in the way we grapple with the inevitability of not living. Let me circle back to where we began. People are weird. You are weird. I am weird. This isn't an insult, and it isn't a problem to solve. It's the baseline condition of being human. Our quirks, contradictions, and eccentricities are not obstacles to overcome but treasures to explore. The sooner we embrace that, the more authentic our lives become. Because the alternative, chasing some illusion of normal, is exhausting and empty. There is no normal. There's only the grand, messy symphony of strangeness we're all playing together. So here's my challenge to you. Notice your weirdness. Don't flinch from it. Celebrate it. Let it out in small ways. Share it with people you trust. You might be surprised how many of them respond. Wait, you do that too. That's the magic moment, the one that turns embarrassment into connection. Weirdness is not isolation, it's invitation. And in a world where so many people feel disconnected, maybe the most radical thing you can do is be unapologetically, gloriously weird. One of the strangest features of human life is how we construct identities out of fragments. You are not one person in the absolute sense. You are a shifting collage of roles, masks, and memories. You're the dutiful employee in one context, the goofy friend in another, the stern parent at home, the vulnerable child when you talk to your own parents, and the private dreamer when you're alone in your room. People say just be yourself. But which self? The very phrase hides the fact that yourself is a kaleidoscope. Weird, isn't it? And yet, it's precisely this flexibility that allows us to navigate the complexity of social life. If you were the same person in every situation, you'd be unbearably rigid. Your weirdness is not just in your quirks. It's in your ability to shift between them, often without realizing. Take the phenomenon of accents. Most people think they have one voice, one way of speaking, but listen closely and you'll notice how you change. At work, your sentences get more formal. With friends, your slang spills out. On the phone with your parents, you might even sound like your childhood self. Some people code switch between entire languages, blending vocabularies mid-sentence. These shifts aren't conscious strategies most of the time. They're automatic. Your vocal cords become chameleons, matching the environment. That's weird, but it's also brilliant. It shows how deeply social we are, and how willing we are to bend ourselves into shapes that fit the moment. Now, think about the rituals we build around time. Birthdays, anniversaries, New Year's Eve. Why do we need these arbitrary markers? The Earth goes around the sun regardless of whether we blow out candles or not. And yet, we insist on celebrating these invisible thresholds. Because they give us a sense of rhythm, a chance to pause and say, This matters. Human beings are not content to let time be a flat line. We need peaks and valleys, punctuation marks in the endless sentence of days. And so we construct them. It's weird that a cake with flaming wax sticks can feel like a profound symbol of existence, but it does. These rituals remind us that life is not just passing, it's accumulating. Another arena of weirdness, our obsession with prediction. We consult horoscopes, weather forecasts, economic reports, tarot cards, personality tests. We want to know what's coming, even though accuracy is often elusive. Why? Because uncertainty makes us anxious. The future is a vast blank page, and our brains scramble to scribble anything on it just to feel calmer. Even when the predictions are nonsense, they provide structure. It's weird to trust your day to the alignment of stars from billions of miles away, but millions do. It's weird to believe that a rodent's shadow in February can predict the arrival of spring, but entire towns gather for it. Prediction rituals are human comfort blankets, stitched from threads of imagination. Now let's touch on the weirdness of objects we fetishize. Consider the museum. People line up to stare at ancient pots, faded manuscripts, or scraps of fabric behind glass. Why? Because these objects connect us to stories bigger than ourselves. Logically, they're just old things. But symbolically, they are vessels of time travel. We project meaning into them, imagining the hands that shape the clay, the voices that once spoke the words. The weirdness is not in the objects themselves, it's in the collective agreement that they are sacred. One person's trash is another culture's priceless artifact. Again, weirdness is not defect. It's design. Another layer, humor. If you try to explain why something is funny, the magic evaporates. Laughter thrives on surprise, incongruity, timing. A pun is essentially a linguistic glitch, two meanings colliding in one sound. Slapstick relies on bodies doing things they're not supposed to do. Satire points at contradictions we'd rather ignore. Objectively, humor is nonsense. Why should twisting words or slipping on a banana peel create joy? And yet, humor might be one of our greatest survival tools. It diffuses tension, bonds groups, and allows us to face darkness without despair. Weirdness is the heart of comedy, and comedy is the heart of resilience. Let's go deeper into relationships again. Ever noticed how friends or couples start to mirror each other? They adopt each other's phrases, mannerisms, even postures. It's as if identity leaks across boundaries. Scientists call this social contagion. We're mimics by nature, absorbing traits like sponges. It's weird to realize that you're partly constructed out of the people around you, that your laugh might be borrowed, your habits stitched from someone else's quirks. But maybe that's what makes community possible. We call through each other's weirdness. Dreams deserve another visit here. Psychologists once tried to catalog common dreams: falling, flying, being chased, showing up naked to class. Each of these is weird in its own way, but what's weirder is that millions of people share them. Why should the brain, in all its individuality, produce recurring archetypes? Maybe it's evolutionary echoes, maybe it's universal anxieties, or maybe it's just the brain recycling familiar scripts. Whatever the cause, dreams remind us that weirdness isn't purely personal, it's collective. You're not alone in dreaming about showing up late to an exam you didn't study for, even if you graduated decades ago. Here's another strange phenomenon: déjà vu. That eerie feeling that you've lived a moment before, though you know you haven't. Neurologists suggest it's a glitch in memory processing, a hiccup where the brain misfiles the present as past. But subjectively, it feels almost mystical, as if time folded over itself. Weird, yes, but also strangely comforting. It suggests that reality might be more layered than our linear minds can grasp. And even if it's just a neural hiccup, it's a reminder that perception is not flawless. We live in a constant dialogue between brain and world, and sometimes the wires get crossed. The result is weirdness disguised as revelation. Let's wander into the weirdness of morality. Across cultures, people disagree on what's right or wrong, sacred or taboo. Some societies eat pigs, others forbid it. Some endorse polygamy, others ban it. Some see honor and revenge, others see honor and forgiveness. Morality is often less about universal truths and more about local weirdness codified into law. That doesn't mean anything goes, it means our sense of right and wrong is more flexible than we like to admit. The weird part is how passionately people defend their moral codes, forgetting that they are products of history and circumstance. Morality is weirdness dressed in solemn robes. Consider the weirdness of boredom. Why does doing nothing feel unbearable? Animals can laze in the sun for hours without complaint, but humans grow restless. We invent distractions, fidget, daydream, scroll endlessly. Boredom is weird because it's a discomfort with our own minds. And yet, psychologists argue it has a purpose. Boredom pushes us to seek novelty, to create, to connect. Without it, we might stagnate. Weird as it feels, boredom might be the engine of progress. There's also the strangeness of how we measure worth. Think about celebrity culture. Millions of people know the names, faces, and trivial habits of strangers they'll never meet. A singer's haircut makes headlines. An actor's breakup becomes public drama. Objectively, this is absurd. Why should one person's life command such attention? But subjectively, it makes sense. Celebrities are screens onto which we project our desires, fears, and fantasies. They embody possibilities we crave or warnings we fear. Celebrity is weirdness monetized. It's proof that humans will elevate certain individuals into myth while ignoring their own neighbors. And then there's the weirdness of silence. Many people can't stand it. In conversation, a pause longer than a few seconds feels unbearable. So we fill it with filler words, small talk, nervous laughter. Silence exposes us. It reveals the gaps in our confidence, the vulnerability of presence. And yet, silence can also be sacred. Monks spend years cultivating it, lovers share it in intimacy, artists crave it for creation. Silence is weird because it's both terrifying and healing. It's a blank canvas that forces us to face ourselves. We can't ignore the weirdness of memory triggers. A song from childhood plays, and suddenly you're transported back 20 years, feeling emotions you thought were gone. A smell of cookies pulls you into your grandmother's kitchen. A photograph unearths a self you barely remember. These triggers bypass logic and plunge straight into emotion. Why should a few notes or molecules of scent wield such power? Because the brain is associative, stitching experiences together in ways that defy linear explanation. Memory is a web, not a filing cabinet, and sometimes the threads vibrate in surprising ways. Weird, yes, but also miraculous. Finally, let's acknowledge the weirdness of storytelling itself. Right now, you're listening to me talk, weaving words into meaning. Objectively, it's just vibrations in the air, decoded by your brain. But subjectively, it's intimacy. We're sharing a mental space, building a world out of sound. Storytelling is humanity's strangest invention, the ability to conjure realities that don't exist and inhabit them together. Every culture does it. Every person craves it. It's weird that lies, fictions, and fantasies can bring comfort, teach lessons, or inspire revolutions. And yet, they do. Storytelling is weirdness harnessed for connection. Let's peel back another layer of weirdness, the strange ways we cope with stress. Some people bite their nails until they bleed. Others pace the room, chew ice, or twist their hair into knots. Still others collect objects obsessively: pens, mugs, keychains, as if amassing enough of them will ward off chaos. These habits don't solve problems in any rational sense, but they offer comfort. They give the mind a repetitive anchor, a signal that at least one small corner of life is under control. Coping mechanisms are human weirdness at its most personal. They're survival tactics masquerading as quirks, and often, they're the little rituals that get us through the hardest days. Take procrastination. Rationally, it's baffling. You have a deadline. You know what's required. You might even want the outcome, and yet you avoid the task until the last possible moment. Why? Because procrastination is rarely about laziness. It's about fear of failure, perfectionism, or an unconscious need to manage anxiety by creating a crisis that focuses the mind. Weird, yes, but also deeply human. We dance with our own resistance, often at great cost, but the rhythm is strangely familiar. Procrastination is a weird tango we perform with time. Speaking of time, think about birthdays. Most adults claim they don't care about them, but watch how moods shift when no one remembers. We insist, it's just another day, but beneath the surface, we crave recognition. Birthdays are weird because they're arbitrary milestones, just another orbit around the sun, and yet, they carry immense symbolic weight. They remind us that existence is finite, that we're moving forward whether we like it or not. And so we mark them with cake, candles, parties, or at least a text message. Weirdness wrapped in ritual becomes meaning. Let's not skip over the weirdness of conversation. Have you noticed how often we talk just to fill space? Nice weather today. How was your weekend? Did you watch that show? These phrases rarely communicate new information, but they serve as social glue. Small talk is weird because it feels meaningless, yet it's essential. It reassures us that we're safe, that the other person acknowledges us, that the air between us is warm. It's not about content, it's about connection. Strip away the words, and you're left with a simple message: I see you. Weird, but necessary. Another oddity: our relationship with sleep. We spend roughly a third of our lives unconscious, vulnerable, hallucinating nightly. Why would evolution design such a thing? Wouldn't it make more sense to keep us alert, maximizing survival? And yet, sleep is non-negotiable. Deprive a person of it long enough, and their mind unravels. We need dreams, rest, the nightly reboot of our brains. From one perspective, sleep is one of the weirdest biological requirements imaginable. From another, it's proof that rest is not a luxury but a foundation. Weirdness, again, hides wisdom. Let's wander into the weirdness of love. The chemical cocktail of attraction makes people do absurd things: writing bad poetry, traveling across continents, ignoring red flags, carving initials into trees. Love is biologically engineered to make us irrational otherwise. Why would we invest so heavily in one person when survival might suggest keeping options open? It's weird to gamble so much of your future on someone else's choices. And yet, love is also one of the most fulfilling experiences we can have. The paradox is that love's weirdness is its power. Its irrationality is what makes it transformative. Art offers another lens. Why do people stare at blobs of paint on canvas, or listen to music that makes them cry, or pay fortunes for sculptures that serve no practical function? Because art feeds something beyond survival. It scratches an itch for meaning, beauty, transcendence. Objectively, art is impractical. Subjectively, it's indispensable. Art is the distilled essence of human weirdness, turned outward for others to witness. It's proof that we are creatures not just of need, but of imagination. And imagination, by definition, is weird. Religion, too, embodies this strangeness. Billions of people gather weekly to sing songs, recite prayers, and listen to stories written thousands of years ago. They follow rituals, honor symbols, and structure their lives around invisible realities. To outsiders, it can look bizarre. To insiders, it's sacred. Religion is weirdness institutionalized, but also weirdness that provides community, morality, and hope. Even for those who reject religion, the human impulse to seek something beyond the visible is unmistakable. We are weird in our longing for transcendence. Consider also the weirdness of numbers. Some people are terrified of the number 13, while others insist on lucky sevens. Mathematically, numbers are neutral, but humans load them with symbolism. Sports jerseys, lottery tickets, hotel floors, all shaped by numerical superstition. This is another way we wrestle control from chaos, inventing meaning where none objectively exists. Weirdness gives us the illusion of order, and sometimes, that illusion is enough. Here's a stranger one: our fascination with the apocalypse. Movies, books, and conversations endlessly imagine the end of the world. Zombies, climate collapse, alien invasions. Why do we fixate on endings? Perhaps because imagining destruction gives us a sense of agency. If we can picture the worst, we can prepare for it, or at least feel a little braver facing uncertainty. Apocalypse fantasies are collective weirdness, rehearsals for fears we can't articulate. They show that even in dread, humans need stories. Now think about pets. Millions of people treat animals as family, dressing them in clothes, celebrating their birthdays, talking to them in baby voices. From a purely biological standpoint, this is bizarre. Why invest so much in another species? And yet, pets bring companionship, unconditional affection, and joy. Weirdness here is simply love expressed across species. It's proof that human hearts are wired for connection, even beyond the boundaries of language or logic. Even stranger is how we talk to ourselves. Out loud, in the mirror, in muttered whispers when no one is around. We coach, scold, encourage, or rehearse conversations. Self-talk is weird because it's dialogue with an audience of one. But psychologists say it's healthy. It helps organize thoughts, regulate emotions, and boost performance. Weirdness, once again, hides utility. What looks like nonsense is often wisdom in disguise. Finally, let's reflect on the weirdness of wonder. Why do we gaze at stars, climb mountains, or dive into oceans just to feel small? Why do we chase sunsets, collect shells, or stop to marvel at rainbows? None of these acts are necessary for survival, and yet, they feel necessary for living. Wonder is weird because it's impractical, but it expands us. It reminds us that life is not just about enduring, it's about experiencing. Wonder might be the weirdest human trait of all, and also the most beautiful. So yes, people are weird and so are you. Not in a dismissive sense, but in the most profound one. Your quirks, habits, contradictions, and curiosities are not mistakes. They are your signature on existence. They are the fingerprints of your humanity. To deny them is to flatten yourself into a stereotype. To embrace them is to step fully into being alive. Weirdness is not what sets you apart from others, it's what binds you to them. Because in the end, the one thing we all share is the strangeness of being human. And maybe, just maybe, that's the most comforting truth there is. If you've followed me this far, you've probably noticed a theme. The strangeness of human life isn't tucked away in rare events or extraordinary circumstances, it's everywhere, woven into the fabric of daily existence. The deeper you look, the more the ordinary reveals itself as peculiar. And perhaps no domain shows this better than the way humans handle emotion. We cry when we're happy. We laugh when we're nervous. We blush when we're embarrassed, as if broadcasting our discomfort to the world could possibly help. Emotion, in its raw mechanics, is weird. It makes our faces twitch, our voices crack, our bodies shake. If aliens observed us, they might assume we're malfunctioning machines, not realizing that these strange expressions are signals coded in our DNA. Take crying, for instance. Tears are salty water leaking from our eyes. What purpose could that possibly serve? Biologists have argued that emotional tears might have evolved as a social signal, a way of broadcasting vulnerability and eliciting comfort from others. That's weird. Our bodies create liquid displays of inner turmoil, and somehow that helps. And yet, when you think about it, tears are one of the most honest forms of communication we have. Words can lie, smiles can be faked, but tears, they betray us. Weird, yes, but profoundly human. Laughter, too, remains mysterious. We laugh at jokes, yes, but also at pain, at surprise, at sheer awkwardness. Some people laugh when they're scared. Others laugh at funerals, unable to suppress the nervous energy. Imagine trying to explain that to an outsider when someone I love has died. Sometimes my body makes a sound that looks like joy, even though I feel devastation. That's human weirdness in a nutshell, contradiction embodied. Then there's the strange way we seek out fear for fun. Horror movies, roller coasters, haunted houses. We willingly put ourselves into situations designed to terrify us, and then we call it entertainment. Why? Because fear, in a safe context, is exhilarating. It's a way of rehearsing danger without real consequences. Adrenaline surges, hearts race, and for a moment, we feel more alive. That's bizarre, enjoying fear. And yet, it reveals a deeper truth: humans crave intensity, even when it makes no rational sense. Let's turn to the weirdness of memory again, but this time through the lens of forgetting. We misplace keys, forget names, lose entire afternoons in the fog of distraction. Why would evolution design such a leaky system? Perhaps because forgetting is as important as remembering. If we carried every detail with equal weight, our minds would drown in clutter. Forgetting allows us to prioritize, to let go of noise. Still, it's weird to realize that your brain is constantly discarding pieces of your life without asking permission. What you think of as you is partly defined by what you've forgotten. Even stranger is the phenomenon of false memories. People can be convinced they experienced things that never happened: seeing a balloon ride in childhood, meeting someone who didn't exist, even witnessing crimes that never occurred. Entire groups can share false memories, like the so-called Mandela effect, where thousands of people swear they remember a detail one way when history records it another. If memory is so malleable, so easily tricked, what does that say about identity? We are creatures who trust our minds, even when they fabricate. That's weird and a little unsettling. Language, too, carries its own absurdities. Why do we say sleep like a baby when babies wake up every 2 hours? Why is a building called a building even after it's finished? Idioms, metaphors, clichés. Language is full of illogical expressions that we repeat without question. To a learner, it's maddening. To a native speaker, it's invisible. And yet, these linguistic quirks carry the fingerprints of history. Jokes that outlive their punchlines, metaphors that harden into stone. Weirdness in language isn't a bug. It's the fossil record of culture. Consider the weirdness of politeness. Humans invented elaborate systems of manners that often prioritize ritual over logic. Why shake hands? Why bow? Why use forks instead of chopsticks, or chopsticks instead of forks? None of it is inherently necessary, but all of it is socially enforced. These rituals of etiquette serve as signals. I respect you. I recognize you. I belong. The weird part is how arbitrary they are and how offended people become when others break them. Forget to say thank you, and you risk being judged as rude. Use the wrong fork at a formal dinner, and someone silently condemns you. Etiquette is collective weirdness masquerading as morality. Now, think about how humans relate to animals. We pamper some, eat others, fear a few, and ignore the rest. Dogs sleep in our beds, cows become hamburgers, spiders trigger panic attacks, and pigeons barely earn a glance. Objectively, these creatures aren't so different. Each is a living organism with its own role in the ecosystem. But subjectively, we assign wildly different values. Why is eating a cow acceptable, but eating a dog abhorrent in some cultures? Why do people cuddle cats but scream at mice? These distinctions are culturally constructed, and therefore, weird. They say more about us than about the animals themselves. Human rituals around death might be the strangest of all. We dress bodies in fine clothes, place them in boxes, and bury them in the ground. Or we cremate them and keep the ashes in urns. Or we build monuments, carve names into stone, and visit regularly to speak to the air. Objectively, the dead don't know or care. And yet, these rituals are vital for the living. They help us process grief, maintain bonds, and give structure to loss. The weirdness lies in our insistence on treating absence as presence. We ritualize what we cannot understand, and in doing so, we create meaning. Speaking of absence, let's talk about ghosts. Across cultures, people tell stories of spirits lingering after death. Some claim to see them, hear them, feel them. Science offers no definitive evidence, and yet, belief persists. Why? Because ghosts embody our deepest weirdness, the refusal to accept finality. If someone we love dies, part of us insists they must still be here somehow. Ghost stories are less about the dead than about the living, about our struggle to reconcile with loss. Weird, perhaps, but profoundly revealing. Even our sense of beauty is strange. Why do certain patterns, proportions, or sounds strike us as beautiful? The golden ratio, symmetry, harmony. Evolutionary psychologists argue that beauty signals health, fertility, stability. But that can't explain why we find sunsets breathtaking, or why music in a minor key makes us cry. Beauty is weird because it defies necessity. It's not required for survival, and yet we pursue it, pay for it, fight wars over it. Beauty is proof that humans don't live by bread alone. We live by strange, ineffable sensations that make existence feel worthwhile. Now, let's step into the weirdness of coincidence. You think of a friend you haven't spoken to in years, and suddenly they text you. You dream about a number, and the next day it appears on a license plate. Rationally, these are random overlaps, but subjectively, they feel charged with meaning. Humans are pattern seekers. We can't help but connect dots, even when there's no real link. Coincidence is weird because it tricks us into seeing destiny where there's only chance. And yet, those moments can be strangely comforting, as if the universe winked at us. Technology multiplies weirdness daily. Think about the fact that billions of people carry around tiny slabs of glass and metal, capable of accessing nearly all human knowledge. And what do they use it for? Cat videos, memes, arguing with strangers in comment sections. That's absurd, and yet, it's deeply telling. Our weirdness drives innovation, and innovation amplifies our weirdness in return. Virtual reality, digital avatars, AI companions. The line between real and imagined blurs more every year. The future promises not less weirdness, but more. And maybe that's the point. So where does all this leave us? The more examples we gather, the clearer it becomes. Weirdness isn't an anomaly. It's the baseline. To be human is to be weird, and to deny it is to deny yourself. The challenge is not to eliminate weirdness, but to embrace it wisely. Celebrate the quirks that bring joy, question the ones that cause harm, and always remember, your weirdness is someone else's normal, and vice versa. Let's continue with one of the most fascinating examples of everyday weirdness: dreams we have while awake. Daydreaming. You're sitting in a meeting. Your boss is droning on about quarterly targets, and suddenly you're on a beach in Italy. Or you're imagining yourself as a famous musician. Or you're reliving a conversation that never actually happened. Why do we do this? Daydreams are mental playgrounds. They're weird because they blur the line between reality and fantasy. You know they're not real, yet they affect your mood, your motivation, even your decisions. A child staring out the window is scolded for not paying attention, but perhaps that's when the brain is most alive, weaving stories, testing possibilities. Weirdness here is creativity disguised as distraction. Another strange feature of the mind is intrusive thoughts. You're holding a baby and suddenly imagine dropping it. You're driving and picture swerving into traffic. You're standing on a bridge and think, what if I jumped? These thoughts horrify us, but psychologists assure us they're common. Everyone has them. They don't mean you want to act on them. They're random misfires of the brain. Still, they're weird. Why would evolution equip us with a mental voice that whispers the very things we fear most? Perhaps as a way of rehearsing danger, scanning for threats. It's unsettling, but it's also part of the strange toolkit of survival. Then there's the weirdness of music. Objectively, it's just organized sound waves. Yet it moves us to tears, makes us dance, binds us in collective emotion at concerts. Certain songs become entwined with memories, so that hearing them years later transports you instantly back in time. Music is weird because it bypasses logic and goes straight to the heart. It unites strangers, heals grief, ignites revolutions. No other species uses sound the way we do. Birds sing, whales call, but humans turn vibrations into symphonies. That's weird and miraculous. Our sense of humor deserves another look here. Why do we laugh at things that are taboo? Why do we tell jokes about death, or make light of our own pain? Gallows humor, as it's called, is one of the strangest survival strategies. It transforms terror into something bearable, horror into something shareable. In hospitals, soldiers' barracks, and disaster zones, humor shows up like an uninvited guest who somehow saves the party. It's weird to laugh in the darkest moments, but maybe it's the only way to keep from breaking. Let's talk about the weirdness of childhood. Kids ask why endlessly, invent imaginary friends, and believe in creatures that defy logic. Santa Claus, the tooth fairy, monsters under the bed. Adults eventually let go of these beliefs, but children live in them fully. Why? Because the boundary between reality and imagination is thinner for them. Weirdness is their default state. They see the world not as it is, but as it could be. And maybe that's why children teach us so much. They remind us that life doesn't have to make sense to be meaningful. Social dynamics carry their own brand of weirdness. Think about clapping. A group of people slaps their hands together rhythmically to show approval. Why does that signal matter? Or think about handshakes, high fives, fist bumps. These gestures are arbitrary, yet they carry enormous social weight. Refuse a handshake, and it's seen as insult. Clap too early at a concert, and you stand out. These small acts are weird, but they keep the machinery of social interaction humming. We can't forget the weirdness of waiting. Humans spend astonishing amounts of time waiting in traffic, in lines, on hold. Waiting drives us mad, but it also creates its own rituals. People check their phones, tap their feet, sigh loudly. Some strike up conversations with strangers, others withdraw into silence. Waiting is weird because it feels both empty and heavy. It's a pause that stretches, a reminder that we don't control time. And yet, waiting often becomes the backdrop for unexpected moments, friendships sparked in line, realizations dawning in traffic. Weirdness thrives in liminal spaces. Now let's examine the weirdness of belief in luck. Athletes wear the same socks for every game. Students bring lucky pens to exams. Gamblers kiss dice before rolling. Rationally, none of this influences outcomes. But subjectively, these rituals matter. They reduce anxiety, create confidence, give a sense of control. Weirdness, once again, serves a psychological purpose. The illusion of influence can be almost as powerful as the real thing. Consider also the weirdness of nostalgia. Why do we ache for the past, even when it wasn't perfect? Why do songs, smells, or photos trigger longing for moments we know were flawed? Nostalgia is bittersweet weirdness. It comforts while it hurts. It's irrational to miss something you can't get back, but it's deeply human. Nostalgia reminds us that time is both precious and strange. Even stranger is our obsession with stories. Humans consume narratives endlessly: books, films, podcasts, gossip. Why? Because stories organize chaos. They give structure to randomness. They tell us who we are, where we came from, what matters. A single story can spark empathy across cultures, inspire movements, or topple empires. Stories are weird because they're fictional frameworks that feel more real than reality itself. And yet, they are the glue of civilization. Finally, let's reflect on the weirdness of self-awareness. We are creatures who not only exist, but know that we exist. We worry about how we appear to others, imagine futures that haven't happened, replay past mistakes on an endless loop. No other species spends so much time outside the present moment. It's weird to be aware of awareness, to think about thinking. But perhaps this is our greatest gift and greatest burden. Self-awareness makes us anxious, but it also makes us capable of art, morality, and love. Weirdness, at its core, is consciousness staring at itself in the mirror. So, when we say people are weird and so are you, what we really mean is that weirdness is not an accessory to life. It is life. It's in the tears we cry, the songs we sing, the stories we tell, the rituals we cling to. Weirdness is our fingerprint as a species. It's what makes us unpredictable, hilarious, tragic, and beautiful all at once. And maybe, just maybe, the weirdest thing of all is that we spend so much time pretending we're normal. If you want to dive even deeper into the strangeness of being human, you need to confront one of the most fascinating realities. Much of what we call culture is just collective weirdness that we've decided to formalize. Think about it: fashion, music, etiquette, politics, even the shape of our cities. These are not inevitable. They're layers of odd traditions, accidents of history, and imaginative leaps that solidified into the structures we take for granted. To recognize this is not to belittle culture but to appreciate its texture. We live inside worlds built from quirks that somehow scaled. Consider holidays. Why does an entire nation take a day off to celebrate a man in a red suit who squeezes down chimneys? Or a bunny that hides eggs? These are absurd stories when viewed literally, but they carry powerful emotional weight. They bring families together, spark traditions, and give children memories that last a lifetime. Holidays are weirdness institutionalized, a way of marking time with collective storytelling. And the beauty is that we know, on some level, it's strange and we lean into it anyway. Dressing up for Halloween, lighting fireworks on New Year's, painting eggs in spring, these are rituals that prove humans crave not just survival, but spectacle. Sports amplify this in another direction. Think of the Olympics. People train their entire lives to run slightly faster, jump slightly higher, throw slightly farther than someone else. Entire nations swell with pride or sink into disappointment based on the outcome of a race measured in hundredths of a second. It's weird when you strip it down. And yet, it feels monumental. Why? Because sports transform the arbitrary into the meaningful. They give us metaphors for struggle, triumph, unity, and rivalry. They allow us to pour emotion into something bounded, safe, and symbolic. Weirdness here is not a flaw. It's the engine of passion. Let's move into the realm of work. The modern office is one of the strangest social inventions. People gather in climate-controlled buildings, stare at glowing screens for 8 hours, and produce documents that may or may not matter in the long run. Coffee breaks, performance reviews, motivational posters. These rituals are weird when you think about them. But they're also bonding mechanisms. Even complaining about work is a kind of ritual, a shared script that makes the monotony bearable. The weirdness of work isn't just in the tasks but in the way it shapes identity. People introduce themselves not as who they are, but as what they do. I'm a teacher. I'm an engineer. I'm a lawyer. Work becomes shorthand for selves, even though it's only a fragment of identity. Now, think about how humans construct hierarchies. From playground cliques to corporate ladders to political systems, people instinctively rank and order themselves. Sometimes it's based on skill, sometimes wealth, sometimes arbitrary traits like height or beauty. Hierarchies are weird because they're both natural and artificial. Primates form them too, but humans add layers of symbolism, like crowns, titles, or corner offices. We pretend these symbols reflect deep truths, when in reality they're just agreements. Weird agreements, but agreements nonetheless. The internet has made weirdness more visible than ever. Niche communities thrive around the strangest interests, collecting vintage staplers, discussing obscure TV shows from the 1980s, or role-playing as medieval peasants. A century ago, these quirks might have been isolated. Now they're global. People find their tribes, no matter how peculiar. And once a group forms, its weirdness normalizes. Within the group, what seems bizarre to outsiders feels completely natural. This is one of the great paradoxes of the digital age. Weirdness, once hidden, is now curated, celebrated, and sometimes monetized. Consider memes. A picture of a distracted boyfriend or a frog becomes a cultural touchstone, shared by millions. Out of context, it's nonsense. In context, it's layered with meaning, irony, and humor. Memes are proof that humans are wired for pattern recognition and inside jokes. They're weird because they collapse complex emotions into absurd simplicity. And yet, they're powerful enough to shape politics, spread ideas, and create community. Weirdness in the internet age is not peripheral, it's central. Let's not ignore the weirdness of ritualized politeness online. Think of the way people sign emails, best regards, sincerely, warmly. These words often mean nothing, yet we use them as social grease. Or the strange dance of likes, retweets, and emojis. A heart symbol doesn't literally mean love, but it's shorthand for acknowledgement. Digital life is riddled with weird signals, and we've learned to interpret them fluently. A thumbs-up icon carries more weight than a paragraph of text. Weird, but effective. Now let's examine the weirdness of our relationship with objects that once were alive. Wood in our furniture, leather in our shoes, even the cotton in our clothes. We surround ourselves with the remnants of life, transformed into tools or decorations. And we rarely think about it. A tree becomes a desk, a cow becomes a jacket, a sheep becomes a sweater. These transformations are so normalized that we forget their strangeness. But every object whispers a history. Weirdness here lies in our ability to forget, to smooth over the origins of things in order to use them comfortably. Even more curious is the way humans relate to weather. Entire moods shift with the sky. Sunshine is joy, rain is melancholy, snow is nostalgia. We check forecasts obsessively, complain about temperatures, and build small talk around the atmosphere. Why should air and water droplets dictate our emotions? It's weird, but it's also universal. The weather is a backdrop we can't control, so we mythologize it. Storms become omens, droughts become curses, clear skies become blessings. Weirdness becomes narrative. Think about travel. People willingly cram themselves into metal tubes, hurtle through the sky at hundreds of miles per hour, and then complain about the peanuts. Air travel is weird in every respect. From security rituals to cramped seats to jet lag, the entire system is absurd if you analyze it. And yet, it's also miraculous. In a single day, you can move across continents, step into a new culture, immerse yourself in a different world. The weirdness of travel is that it makes the impossible feel routine. Now, let's talk about the weirdness of health fads. From leeches to kale smoothies to cryotherapy, humans constantly reinvent what it means to be healthy. Some practices are beneficial, others dubious. But all reflect the same drive, control over the body. People will drink green sludge, run barefoot, or sit in freezing chambers because someone convinced them it's good. Health, in many ways, is shaped by weird rituals. And when enough people adopt them, they stop looking weird at all. The body itself remains a source of endless strangeness. Think about hiccup spasms with no clear purpose, or sneezing when you look at bright light, or the appendix, an organ with no obvious function. The human body is a patchwork of evolutionary leftovers, jury-rigged solutions, and mysterious quirks. We normalize most of it, but if you stop to consider, you realize how odd it all is. We are, quite literally, weird from the inside out. Finally, consider the weirdness of hope. Humans believe in better futures even when logic suggests otherwise. We make resolutions we rarely keep. We cling to optimism in the face of overwhelming odds. We imagine utopias, dream of cures, envision peace. Hope is weird because it defies evidence. And yet, it's what keeps us moving. Without it, we'd collapse under the weight of reality. Weirdness here is survival disguised as faith. Let's push further into the territory of weirdness by considering our obsession with collecting. Stamps, coins, sneakers, comic books, action figures, vinyl records. Entire industries thrive on the human urge to gather objects that often serve no practical purpose. Why does someone need hundreds of sneakers or thousands of stamps? Because collecting scratches an itch deeper than logic. It's about control, memory, identity. Each object becomes a little anchor in time, a way to impose order on chaos. Collections are weird because they transform ordinary objects into sacred treasures. And the strangest part, the value is mostly imaginary. A rare coin is only valuable because people agree it is. That shared illusion becomes reality. Weirdness turns paper and metal into meaning. Another curious behavior, talking to machines. People scold their computers, thank their GPS, or plead with their cars. We know, rationally, that machines don't care. Yet anthropomorphism is irresistible. We project personality onto anything that responds to us, even minimally. That's why we name our Roombas, yell at our printers, or say sorry when bumping into furniture. It's weird, but it reveals our deep need for connection. Loneliness drives us to populate the world with imagined companions. Weirdness becomes comfort. Let's look at sleep rituals. Some people need absolute silence, others need white noise. Some must have a specific pillow, others can't sleep without socks. Rituals around sleep are weird because the goal is simple rest, yet the paths are wildly diverse. Sleep should be universal, but it becomes individualized theater. And once a ritual is established, breaking it feels impossible. Forget your favorite blanket, and suddenly you're restless. The weirdness of sleep isn't just biological. It's cultural and personal. Consider the weirdness of superstition in daily life. Athletes wear the same undershirt for every game. Actors say break a leg instead of good luck. Students avoid stepping on cracks before exams. These habits are irrational, but they persist. Superstition is weird because it acknowledges our lack of control while pretending to offer some. It's a dance with uncertainty, a way of telling ourselves we have influence over outcomes we don't. Single quotes. Food culture offers another buffet of weirdness. Think about the sheer variety of things humans have decided are edible. Snails, seaweed, fermented beans, insects, poisonous fish prepared carefully enough not to kill you. To one culture, these are delicacies. To another, they're disgusting. Food taboos are equally strange. Why is beef sacred in one place and steak in another? Why is pork a staple for some and forbidden for others? Food is weirdness codified into taste, ritual, and identity. And yet, nothing reveals human diversity more vividly than what we put on our plates. Then there's the weirdness of nostalgia loops. People rewatch the same TV shows, reread the same books, listen to the same songs on repeat. Why? Because familiarity feels safe. Life is unpredictable, but the ending of your favorite movie never changes. Nostalgia is weird because it's a longing for something that doesn't exist anymore, not just the show or the song, but the version of you who first experienced it. Every rewatch is a visit to your own past. Think about our relationship with pets again. We talk to them as if they understand every word. We buy them clothes, birthday presents, even strollers. We invent entire inner lives for them, projecting human traits onto animal behavior. A cat isn't ignoring you, it's being sassy. A dog isn't begging, it's smiling. This anthropomorphism is weird, but it strengthens bonds. It makes us feel less alone. Weirdness here is love extended beyond species. Another peculiar trait is our fascination with gossip. We exchange stories about people who aren't present, speculating, exaggerating, sometimes inventing. Objectively, gossip wastes time. But subjectively, it enforces social norms, spreads information, and bonds groups. Gossip is weird because it thrives on absence. The person being discussed isn't there, and yet it shapes reputations and relationships. Entire communities function on the fuel of whispered stories. Let's explore the weirdness of rituals around beginnings. New Year's resolutions, first day of school photos, cutting ribbons at ceremonies. These acts don't cause the new phase to happen, but they mark it. Humans can't resist symbolic thresholds. We want a clean slate, a ritual to declare, now we begin. It's weird, but it gives weight to time. Even stranger is the way humans find meaning in random patterns. Clouds become dragons, tea leaves become prophecies, stars become constellations. Our brains are wired for pareidolia, the tendency to see faces or figures where none exist. It's weird to look at the moon and see a rabbit, or a toast and see a saint, but it's universal. Weirdness here reveals imagination bleeding into perception. We don't just see the world, we decorate it. Think about how humans treat time zones. We've sliced the planet into imaginary segments so that noon in New York isn't noon in Tokyo. It's arbitrary and weird, yet without it, global life would be chaos. Airplanes rely on it, markets depend on it, families use it to stay connected. Time zones are collective weirdness at planetary scale. The weirdness of measurement is similar. Feet, inches, meters, liters, all arbitrary systems. Why is water freezing at 0 in Celsius but 32 in Fahrenheit? Why is a mile longer than a kilometer? Measurement feels objective, but it's riddled with historical accidents. We live inside these systems as if they were laws of nature, forgetting they were invented. Weirdness hides in plain sight. And finally, consider the weirdness of identity. You have a name, a nationality, a set of documents that declare who you are. But these markers are fragile. Change your name, move countries, get new papers, and suddenly you're someone else in the eyes of society. Identity feels permanent, but it's built on paper and perception. Weirdness is realizing that you is partly an agreement between you and everyone else. So, let's bring it all together. Weirdness is not the exception, it's the rule. From the way we eat to the way we love, from the rituals we invent to the stories we tell, weirdness is everywhere. And the strangest truth of all, we spend so much energy pretending we're not weird. But the real freedom comes when you stop hiding and start embracing it. Because once you see that everyone is strange, you stop feeling alone. Weirdness becomes connection, and connection becomes meaning. As we reach the final stage of this long meditation on human strangeness, it's worth pausing to notice how much ground we've covered. We've explored laughter, tears, rituals, dreams, food, fashion, language, superstition, culture, and memory, all the ordinary domains where weirdness flourishes. And yet, there's always more to say, because weirdness is infinite. To live as a human being is to be suspended in a web of contradictions that never quite resolve. This is why philosophy, art, and even casual conversation never run out of material. The oddness of existence is inexhaustible fuel. Let's begin this final stretch with the weirdness of silence in modern life. For much of history, humans lived surrounded by natural soundscapes, wind, birds, water, distant voices. Absolute silence was rare. Now, we crave it. People buy noise-canceling headphones, soundproof their bedrooms, retreat to silent meditation retreats. Why? Because our world is saturated with artificial noise, traffic, notifications, background music in stores. Silence feels weird precisely because it's scarce. And when we do find it, many of us feel uneasy. A quiet room can feel oppressive, even threatening. Yet silence also heals, resets, clarifies. This paradox, craving what unsettles us, is a signature of human weirdness. Another dimension of strangeness is the way we ritualize beginnings and endings. We clap at the end of performances, cut ribbons at openings, throw graduation caps into the air. These gestures are unnecessary from a practical perspective, but deeply necessary from a psychological one. Humans need markers. Without them, life blurs. Think of how disorienting it felt during times when rituals were interrupted, graduations canceled, weddings postponed, funerals reduced. People mourn not just the events but the loss of ritual itself. The weirdness here is that our sense of meaning often depends less on the event and more on the symbolic gestures around it. Now consider the weirdness of touch. A hug can comfort or suffocate, depending on context. A handshake can signal respect or dominance. A pat on the back can encourage or condescend. Touch is ambiguous, and that's what makes it powerful. In a world of words and images, touch remains primal. Babies deprived of it fail to thrive, even if all other needs are met. Adults crave it in subtle ways, sometimes disguising it as accidents, brushing shoulders, brief hand squeezes. It's weird that a simple gesture of skin against skin carries such weight, but it does. Touch reveals that we are not just thinking creatures, we are embodied, and our bodies speak. Dreams still have more to teach us. One of the strangest features of dreaming is how convinced we are of their reality while inside them. You might be flying through a city made of marshmallows, chased by a giant squirrel, and never think, "This makes no sense." Only upon waking do you laugh. This reveals a profound weirdness. Our minds can generate entire worlds indistinguishable from waking life, at least until we compare. And this raises unsettling questions. If your brain can trick you so thoroughly in sleep, how do you know it isn't tricking you now? Philosophers have asked this for centuries, and science still doesn't have a full answer. Weirdness isn't just in dreams, it's in the possibility that waking life may itself be another kind of dream. Let's turn to the weirdness of how humans treat time. We chop it into hours, minutes, seconds, arbitrary divisions that rule our lives. We live by clocks, set alarms, track birthdays, schedule meetings. But time doesn't care. The earth spins, seasons change, bodies age. Our measurement systems are scaffolding we've built to make the infinite digestible. And yet, we often feel enslaved by them. We say we waste time, kill time, save time, as if time were a wallet of coins. Weirdly, this metaphorical currency governs our emotions. If you feel you've wasted a day, you feel guilty. If you think you've used it well, you feel proud. But what does using time well even mean? That's the weirdness. We invented timekeeping, and now it rules us. Even stranger is how memory interacts with time. People often remember events not as they were but as they felt. Your childhood summer might have been filled with boredom, but in memory, it glows golden. That vacation where it rained every day might be recalled as cozy instead of frustrating. Memory edits, polishes, and exaggerates. It's weird that we trust memory so deeply when it is so unreliable. Yet without this flawed system, we would have no narrative, no identity. Weirdness lies in the fact that our very sense of self depends on a storyteller who embellishes shamelessly. Now let's reflect on the weirdness of morality. Humans create codes of right and wrong, then argue endlessly about them. One culture prizes honesty at all costs, another prizes harmony over blunt truth. One group sees revenge as justice, another as sin. These moral maps feel eternal to their holders, but in reality, they are shifting sand. History is full of practices once considered moral that now horrify us, and vice versa. The weirdness is not that morality changes, but that people are often blind to the fact that it does. We cling to our codes as if they were carved in stone, forgetting that they are drawn in chalk. Consider also the weirdness of our relationship to the cosmos. For most of human history, people looked up at the night sky and invented stories. Constellations became hunters, bears, lovers, gods. Today, science tells us stars are nuclear furnaces billions of light years away. But the stories persist. We still gaze upward and feel awe, fear, longing. Why? Because the cosmos is the ultimate mirror of our weirdness. It's unimaginably vast, indifferent, and yet we personalize it. We make wishes on stars. We ask the universe for signs. We treat infinity like a companion. That's weird, but also profoundly human. Finally, let's touch on the weirdness of endings. Humans need closure, even when reality doesn't provide it. We want stories to resolve, conflicts to conclude, relationships to end cleanly. But life is messy. People drift apart without goodbyes. Projects remain unfinished. Questions remain unanswered. This lack of closure torments us. So we invent rituals, funerals, final episodes, last words to give shape to endings. It's weird to crave what reality rarely grants, but perhaps it's necessary. Closure is less about truth and more about comfort. Weirdness gives us the tools to survive uncertainty. Another layer of weirdness is how we mythologize beginnings. Babies are born every second, yet each one feels like a cosmic event to the family. Parents throw showers, take endless photos, and write baby books. Objectively, reproduction is biological. Subjectively, it's miraculous. The weirdness is that we treat the ordinary as extraordinary, and perhaps that's the secret of meaning. Life would feel unbearable if we only acknowledged its statistical banality. Weirdness allows us to elevate the everyday into the sacred. Education mirrors this tendency. Think about graduation ceremonies. People wear robes and hats that trace back to medieval traditions. They march to the same song, toss caps into the air, and shake hands to symbolize intellectual achievement. Rationally, you could just email the diploma, but that wouldn't feel complete. The ritual, with all its odd costumes and gestures, transforms paperwork into transformation. Weirdness makes milestones tangible. Another domain of weirdness, human communication in the digital era. Consider emojis. Small cartoon faces, vegetables, and random objects replace complex emotions. Someone sends you a peach emoji, and you know it doesn't mean fruit. Someone sends 3 crying laughing faces, and you understand it as shorthand for genuine amusement. Language evolves, but the weirdness of emojis is that they collapse centuries of linguistic nuance into tiny pictures. And somehow, it works. Our obsession with identity is equally strange. We define ourselves by nationality, career, hobbies, music taste, even favorite sports teams. We build entire personalities around coffee preferences or smartphone brands. I'm an Android person. I can't function without Starbucks. Identity, in this sense, is a collage of micro-weirdnesses assembled into a portrait. It's fragile, shifting, often contradictory, and yet, it feels like the most solid thing we own. The weirdness lies in the fact that we are both more and less than these labels. Then there's the weirdness of aging. Time transforms us in ways we can't control. Hair grays, skin wrinkles, reflexes slow. And yet, internally, many people still feel young. A 70-year-old might look in the mirror and think, "Who is that?" Aging is weird because it splits us into 2 selves, the body that changes and the mind that resists. Cultures handle this weirdness differently. Some honor age as wisdom, others worship youth and deny decay. But in all cases, aging is a confrontation with the strangeness of being temporary. Death rituals, as we touched on before, are another well of weirdness. Humans build cemeteries, carve headstones, light candles, and speak to the dead. We write obituaries, plant trees, keep photos on mantels. We even create digital memorials, now Facebook pages that persist after someone passes. Weirdness here is the insistence that bonds transcend physical presence. Rationally, the dead are gone. Emotionally, they remain. Weirdness bridges that gap, allowing grief to take form. Let's not forget the weirdness of art and entertainment. People cry over fictional characters, debate endlessly about movies, and line up at midnight for book releases. Stories that exist only in imagination can shape real decisions, friendships, even careers. Fans tattoo symbols from franchises onto their bodies, as if they were ancient totems. That's weird, but it proves the power of imagination. Humans are the only creatures who live as intensely in made-up worlds as in real ones. Weirdness is our passport to alternate realities. Music adds its own peculiar note. Think of national anthem songs that stir patriotism, pride, or tears. Objectively, they're just melodies. Subjectively, they're sacred. Or consider lullabies, adults singing nonsense syllables to soothe babies who don't understand the words. The power isn't in logic but in rhythm, tone, and ritual. Weirdness, once again, carries emotional truth. Let's zoom in on the weirdness of habits. Why do some people always tap their foot, crack their knuckles, or twirl their hair? Habits often begin unconsciously and persist even when unnecessary. They comfort, distract, or simply fill space. Habits are weird because they reveal the automatic side of self, the part that runs without conscious approval. Yet they become part of our identity. Someone might say, "That's just what I do," forgetting that the behavior has no inherent purpose. Another example, the weirdness of generosity. Humans often give away resources with no expectation of return. We donate to strangers, volunteer time, or leave tips for service. From a survival standpoint, this seems irrational. But generosity strengthens community, builds reputation, and satisfies emotional needs. Weirdness here is the refusal to reduce life to self-interest. We are weird enough to care about people we'll never meet, even strangers. Our obsession with the future. People make 5-year plans, retirement strategies, bucket lists. Yet none of us knows if we'll be alive tomorrow. Weirdness is planning for a reality that might never come. But without it, we drift aimlessly. Weirdness here provides direction, even if it's imaginary. And then there's the weirdness of endings themselves, like this episode. You've listened through thousands of words dissecting the absurd, the irrational, the contradictory. And maybe you've laughed, nodded, or felt exposed. But the strangest truth is this: embracing weirdness isn't about cataloging quirks. It's about recognizing that weirdness is the essence of being human. The sooner you stop resisting it, the sooner you feel at home in your own skin. So here's the closing thought: people are weird and so are you. That's not a flaw, it's a gift. Your quirks, contradictions, and peculiarities are the fingerprints of your soul. Without them, you'd be a bland echo of someone else's idea of normal. With them, you are unmistakably you. Embrace the weird. Celebrate it. Share it. Because in the end, weirdness is not what separates us. It's what unites us.